We'll be starting live. We're live now. This is Lisa Gasparo. Okay, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm very excited to be here. And I am here to talk to you about the legal aspects of planned giving. I'm an attorney that has been practicing in the area of estate planning for 23 years now. I'm a member of Gasparo Attorneys at Law, and it's myself actually and my husband that are partners. We have been together in that capacity for about 10 years. Prior to that, we each had firm jobs with larger firms. My husband worked with Catmuck and Rosenman downtown, and I actually also worked for Lord Bissell and Brooks. So we have come from big firms, and now we have been together in a small firm together now for quite a while. So my focus really here is to talk to you a little bit about how we can structure planning from donors through trusts and estate planning. And it's interesting, there's many different ways that you can do this. So my focus today is really going to be more talking about how do we talk with donors, how do we achieve their objectives, and what are they looking for, and what vehicles do donors use or can they use in order to benefit the charitable interests that they love the most. So forgive me for having to walk back and forth with my PowerPoint here, but I just wanted to again, been practicing since 1996, and this is my focus. I am also a member of the United States Tax Court, as well as a member of the Roll of Attorneys for the United States Supreme Court. I do practice in Illinois. So anyway, very happy to be here. So I'm going to kind of focus on two different ways we can talk about advanced planning, all through trust though, and then I'll talk a little bit about other ways that donors can give. And this is beneficial for, I like to say that everybody is charitable, so everybody in this room is with a nonprofit. We can think about, of course, our nonprofits as the recipients of the giving, but everybody in and of themselves also has a charitable interest as well. So we can think about these things both personally and as it respects our various nonprofits. So the most important thing to remember is, just let me briefly talk about a description of what a trust is. So when we create a trust, it's either going to be revocable or irrevocable. Revocable means it's changeable. You can change it. You can change your mind. Okay? You can amend it. Irrevocable means you can't change the trust document. So primarily we will use revocable trust when we're talking about estate planning, people's initial estate planning where they're thinking about where they're going to give their things when they pass, who's going to take care of them, and all of these issues. And my focus of this presentation today is not so much going to talk about the details of those things, other than to say that when you create a trust for somebody's estate plan, the focus is going to be upon their death. Where are they going to leave their things? People, many people that I deal with are extremely charitable. And we do talk about people or donors who might want to give all of their assets to a particular charity or charities. But many people, will come into my office and say, I want to leave, 90% of my estate to my children, but I really want to leave 10% to this charity I hold near and dear. And so, honoring those intentions, helping them achieve that objective is really important to what we do. And when you have a trust, some things that it can do is avoid probate and, protect assets from creditors on death. So let me just briefly touch on that. When you have a trust that is properly funded as an estate plan, that means that the assets are titled in the name of the trust or otherwise connected to the trust during life. So John Smith is an example. He has a house, he has some savings, he's not a super wealthy man, he's done okay in his life, and he just wants to protect what he has earned during his lifetime, right? So if he creates the John Smith Trust and transfers the ownership of his house into his trust, and then just make sure that he either has his accounts owned by his trust or otherwise trust designated as beneficiary, that will avoid probate court in Illinois. And what's interesting about that is a lot of times that can be very expensive. So when you're trying to maximize the ability of somebody to give through their estate, minimizing the cost to the estate is crucial. Another big factor is when you avoid probate, you also, most of the time are going to minimize contests because a trust is a private document. So someone can privately leave to a beneficiary, and it's not public record through the court like a will would be. Okay, so you might have somebody that has assets, that has loved ones that definitely they want to give something to. Maybe they wouldn't understand that they're giving money to a charity. They might be mad about that. In a trust, it's private, so it's kind of important. So when you're talking about having a lower risk of trust contests or probate, creditor issues coming out of that, it helps maximize the amount that they have to give, right? So just some key things there. So, just touching on all of these things, there's a lot of different ways we can do it. We have a lot of people that'll come in and, like I said, give the example of I'm going to give a percentage to my loved ones and I want a percentage to a particular charity. There are people that say, I want to give a lump sum, dollar amount to a particular charity or a number of charities. And these are people who do not have large estates. Many, many, many people are very charitable if you talk to them. And I think the most important thing that I observe when I'm working with them is the relationship that is formed with their charity, and I think that, what I observe is that relationship is really what is the driving force for a lot of people to give, and it's very important. So I know when the last gentleman was speaking about people want to be kind of actively engaged in a charity, I agree with that. I think that that's, where you're really going to find that love of what is being done. So that's just one way to think about, talking to donors about giving. It doesn't have to be somebody who is very, very wealthy, who's trying to avoid the estate tax problem. It can be just regular people all throughout our community that everybody has their own unique interest, everybody has something they love, and everybody is really, most of the time, very interested in helping that charitable interest and are very glad to do it through their estate plan. So a trust is a very nice way to do it, and just my observation is when I speak with people, again, when they're talking about giving, they're talking about the love of the charity, they're talking about the love of the people at the charity. It doesn't have to be a very large charity most of the time, many, many, many times. In fact, it can be a smaller organization that they've just really developed this connection with. So that's something to think about. Oh my goodness, sorry. I don't know why that turned off. So, now, when we begin to talk about larger estates, there are also, in addition to just doing an estate plan that says upon my death I'm going to leave a percentage of my estate to a charitable organization or organizations, there are other things that people can do that are very interesting now. Now, this type of donor, which is actually getting more common also now, and that is somebody that has a lot of assets that they don't necessarily need the principal from those assets. They just really want to live off the income. I had a woman who, she had, an investment portfolio. She had no children, and her church, her particular church in her community was everything to her. And so as long as she could simply live off of her income, she was happy to help people by giving, in essence, the principal of her money to this church. So there's different things like that I'm going to kind of go over that are what I guess you would call more of an advanced planning technique. But the idea is when you see somebody who, may have a larger estate, doesn't necessarily, they're never going to spend the money in their estate, no matter what happens. So, financial advisors think about somebody who, even if they had this long-term care situation, even if their long-term care situation was going to go for 20 years, their income is sufficient to be able to cover that. Okay, so they have this principle that they really safely can say they're honestly just not ever really going to use, or at least not all of it, or a significant portion of it. Okay, and there are more people out there today than you realize. Okay, they're all over the place. We're right next door. Okay, and again, what drives those donors, I have found, again, the love for their organization. So this woman, she was 98. I mean, she went to church every Sunday. When she got sick, they came to her, and it was just that relationship. And she observed, key to what this gentleman also said before was, you know, she observed them helping, you know, various needy, you know, situations in the church, and she observed that, and that was very moving to her. So she would, you know, watch money be donated. She would in turn see the effects of that donation, and that was huge. So she felt very comfortable knowing that, hey, if I do this, I know that it's going to get to the causes that I care so much about, right? So here, when we talk a little bit about, you know, what are the benefits to the donor, okay, would be a lot of times these people are higher net worth individuals, you know, 4, 5, 6 million and more, and you know, they would like the idea of, you know, I don't really need this principal now. I'm happy to donate today because, you know, maybe there's something going on that I want to see that, you know, help somebody, and I want to be here and see it, you know. Which this particular person I'm thinking of was able to observe that. They would tell her, they would show her, she would see what she had done, and it brought her such great joy from that. May increase retirement income. I always have to put the may in there because I can never promise anything, but I can tell you with pretty, you know, comfort that in general, when we structure these things with a qualification that you always have to check with a tax advisor, a financial advisor, an attorney, and all those things, but if properly structured, they do create an income stream, and if properly done, it can be kind of, I guess you could say, sort of a guaranteed income stream, similar to what you might call like an annuity, okay? So that they can then know that, hey, I've got my money in a place where it's producing this stream that I know then that I'm able to pay for my caregiver, I'm able to pay for my health costs or whatever I need, okay? And then they're also, this is extremely complex, so I'm speaking very generally today about this. When we do these types of things, it is always a very careful analysis because there's extremely complex income tax and estate tax rules regarding what you can deduct, how it's deducted and when, and also with capital gains as well. So just speaking very generally, that again, this is the type of situation that, you know, you would spend some time, we would review once they understood what their intent was with a charity, to make sure that their generosity indeed was going to, you know, they were going to benefit from their generosity as well, you know. And then just benefits worthy charitable organizations. You know, a lot of people say, you know, I've got money sitting there. I mean, it's nice to know it's there, but the fact is, I mean, it's going to be there when I pass on out of this life. You know, maybe I want to really affect the world somehow with that. So that's sort of the idea we think about. So I'm going to talk about two that we commonly do through trusts. They're called a charitable remainder trust and a charitable lead trust. You may have heard these terms occasionally, but those are two of the ways, that's not two of the, you know, the only two, but are two common ways that we look at. So just to touch on charitable remainder trust, so you have a donor that makes a gift of property, and that is literally what it means. A lot of times we think of liquid assets. It can be any type of property. Again, this is a very complex, well thought out, structured thing. But they make it to an irrevocable trust. So for example, our firm would create the trust. And remember how we talked about there's two types of trusts. There's revocable and irrevocable. So this is something they can't change, so this is a big decision, right? You know, they're really making a decision that, hey, once I donate to this, it's there now, it's done, okay? And they get annual income from the trust for life or a specific number of years. Again, that's a tax and financial analysis. And the charitable organization is the final beneficiary. So a lot of times we see when this is structured, the charity then knows that they're going to receive these bequests, and a lot of times with their planning purposes, they can then say, well, we know we have this gift that is ours, you know, because it's through the irrevocable trust, and so that's a way to give some certainty there.
Lisa?
Yeah?
Can that be a property that the charity can use during the life of the donor? And like pay on it and then receive it on their passing?
So without sounding too lawyer-like, the answer is that depends.
Okay.
That's possible.
That's
That's
fine.
the beauty of a trust, though,
Yeah.
is that the nice thing I like about trust is as long as you're following all applicable laws, the idea is there's a lot of, the donor has some ability to feel a sense of, even though they turn over control by gifting to this trust, at the same time they're able to observe, so they feel like they're still able to observe and kind of be a part of something, right? Even though they're giving up control, because that's the legal, what they're actually doing is giving up control, right? And at the same time, a trust can be creative, again, that's something that, we talked about. So without promising that, I would say instead they would depend on the circumstances. But the beauty of doing this way is that we are able to have, conversations like that and review things like that, to see if that's possible, whereas it might not be possible in another situation. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
thank you.
I have a piggyback question on that from the
Yeah.
last slide too. So if it's a donation of property, and then he mentioned once they pay for it, I'm a little confused. So is
I'm
it?
saying they
Yeah,
pay
he
while they're
wouldn't-
using it.
Yeah, we probably wouldn't have a paying component. Well, it might, so this
Well,
is,
it said they still retain, they're getting income from the trust.
yeah, so just imagine John Smith, our nice pretend person, he decides he's gonna make a gift of, it could be, and this is very complex because without tripping up on, in terms of the very complex laws associated with this, in general, property could be any number of things.
Right.
He gives a gift of property that produces income to an irrevocable trust, and he decides to call it, the ABC Irrevocable Trust, or the Charitable Irrevocable Trust, or whatever he wants to call it. There is going to be an independent trustee in charge of that trust, okay? And then trustee would be, think of a trustee kind of as a manager, okay? So John Smith's not the trustee of that trust, that's how he's giving up control, right? The trustee is gonna be somebody who is independent, and when I say the word independent, what I mean is somebody that is not subservient to John Smith, so it can't be like John Smith's wife, it can't be his child, it's gotta be somebody independent that is not subservient to him, okay? And that trustee will then be serving in a fiduciary role and must honor the terms of the trust. So, so the question is, what is the thing that can be gifted into the trust? That answer to that question will depend on the tax rules at the time, the nature of the property, and also the terms of the trust. All those things are going to be sort of answering that question. So in general, I think it would be safe to say that it's possible if you have somebody that is charitable, that in essence, is a person who loves, this charitable organization or group of organizations, and they decide, I really, I want to give this. Most of the time, there's a way we can do that, okay? As long as we take the time to make sure everything is proper and that they understand what they're doing, right? Because it's a big thing, they're giving their property away, right? So the key benefits to the donors are, there's very complex capital gains tax rules on this stuff, but a lot of times, some people who might be interested in this type of plan would be somebody that might have a capital gains issue. For example, somebody hypothetically might have an apartment building or something that they've inherited, and, they have a huge capital gains tax problem on the sale. Maybe they don't have any immediate beneficiaries, in their life. Maybe their charity is their beneficiary, right? So, as long as they're getting enough income, they can give that, and then there's ways that can defer the impact of capital gains tax. So so we're able to use the property, we're able to defer that capital gains tax. And then also, this is again extremely complex, but there will be a partial income tax deduction depending on, all the specifics of the situation. And then possibly, if they were a person who had a higher estate worth, in Illinois, the Illinois inheritance tax is $4 million. And of course, we know the federal is now essentially, just for general purposes, I'll say $11 million. So, is it possible they may receive some benefit there with estate taxes or gift taxes? Generally speaking, gifts to qualified charity are generally speaking tax deductible. So there's always those components there. So, given the circumstances, it's an excellent thing. So there really wouldn't necessarily be a payment in there. Unless I'd have to look at that and see, but really the main concept is we have a situation where someone has, you know, they have a larger estate that is able to generate that income that would sustain them. They're charitable, they really want to help and see a difference in this world now, and maybe they have some tax concerns that could be alleviated by giving, and they have a connection to your organization, right? That they love your organization, and so therefore, then there's a way that we can look at that and say, how can we benefit everybody, you know, to achieve the best result for everybody is sort of the idea, okay? I'm gonna have to put my password in again, I'm sorry.
Okay, while you do that, I'd like to ask another question.
Yeah.
So the donation of property, does it have to be irrevocable? So say you have a building or an estate that takes over an entire city block, and you want this charity to have it for maybe 10 years. And after that, you take a review and decide if you want someone else to have it.
So that is a really fantastic question, because we are now talking about a charitable deed trust. And as you can see, donor makes a gift of property to an irrevocable trust, so same, you know, idea. Charitable organization is income recipient and receives either a fixed percentage of the net fair market value of the trust assets, or an annual fixed amount for a certain period of time, or the life of the donor or another individual. So there's all sorts of ways we can do this. And at the end of the trust term, the trust assets are passed to donors' beneficiaries. So there are ways we can structure it. So again, the thing to remember is, this is really, I was just kind of giving a general overview. There are so many ways we can do things depending on the particular situation. You know, there's such a great way to really benefit charities for those who are really charity minded, okay? So yeah, that's an excellent question. Key benefits briefly, you know, so of course the donor gets to create a legacy by contributing to a charity. It permits the transfer of assets to heirs with significantly reduced estate or gift taxes. It may reduce income taxes, and it's a flexible planning tool to try to zero out the estate tax. Okay, so that's charitable deed trust. And then, you know, just to recap, you know, when we're talking about, I would refer to it, I guess, as standard planning. You know, you have a situation where a person is very charity minded, and whether they're giving a portion of their estate or all of their estate to a beloved charity or charities, there's very easy and convenient ways to do this through a trust that really minimize cost to the estate, maximize you know, the gifts to everybody, right? So that's what I would say on a standard plan. So remember, you know, you don't have to be the very, 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 very wealthy people to be able to benefit. I mean, there's many, many people that would love to give a dollar amount of their estate to charities that they love, and of course, it's one of those things that if you're able to meet with those people and see them, then that ultimately is very beneficial, of course, to charity. And then, of course, we have the advanced charitable planning now that allows gifts now while addressing specific donor needs. And of course, the big caveat that with any of this stuff, there are such enormously complex tax laws and estate laws with regard to this stuff. So really, really, even if it's so specific to individuals, so even if you have, you know, do a charitable deed trust for one individual, you could have another person that looks sort of similar, that it's totally different the way we approach that. So it's so crucial that we have, you know, make sure that people are told to make sure you have proper advice from the tax advisor, financial professional of their choice to determine what is best for them. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And let's see here. Oh, I think somehow this got out of order. I was wondering where this was. So sometimes you might also hear of a charitable gift annuity. This is also a good thing to do, but this goes straight to the organization. So my only qualifier is a charitable gift annuity is a contract between a donor and a charity. So the donor gives the money to the charity, and then the charity will pay property to the charity in exchange for potentially a partial tax deduction. My only caveat I would say to the donor is sometimes the donor may be less involved because, again, when they are able to choose their trustee, you know, I'm able to say, okay, almost like what the gentleman from Chicago Community Trust was saying, that here he's managing it. It's, you know, once you give that away to the charity, there may be, once it's given away no matter what, you know, even if you're not happy necessarily with how it's being managed. So that's just my estate planning perspective is, you can certainly do that. I like to do it through the estate planning tool though, because it does give the donor the ability to structure that gift a little more, so. Any questions?
You brought up Daniel Ash, and were you here for
Yes.
the whole presentation where he
I
talked
came
about-
in midway, yeah.
Did you catch the part about how the new younger donors
Yes,
get very engaged?
yes,
They want to participate, they want to bring their time and their expertise.
yes.
Do you have that at your level of donors, or is this really just, I want to see my money do good?
No, you know, it's really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up because I don't feel it's really an age thing either, because I see a lot of people who are not, I actually was going to try to look up the millennials in general. I'm not sure what those age brackets are. You know, I honestly don't know. I don't even know what I am. I don't know if that means I'm something. The group that doesn't know what they are, they're called this. You know?
Okay, those are baby boomers. We don't
It's
know.
interesting because one of the things that I had mentioned, it was on a prior slide, but I can just talk about it now, is a lot of times, and this is not just with respect to estate planning, but people can set up a not-for-profit now. I do it all the time, and actually get it to be a 501c3. I do that for a lot of people, and it does not have to be a large organization. For example, I have actually a nice brief story. So I had a gentleman, a sister, and a brother who were both just retired. Okay. And this particular gentleman had been a pilot, and I think his sister had been a teacher or something like that. And so they finally were retired, and their mother died, and they felt very bad, of course, about that. And so she left them not a very large inheritance, it was just some money, right? And they were fine themselves. They were self-sufficient, and so they decided that they wanted to set up this nonprofit. And so I did that for them. And so they put that money into the nonprofit. And it was just, and so it was for charitable purposes. And they had an interest in, helping needy children. And so I went through and I did that. That's another part of what I do through my estate planning. And I got it approved through the IRS as a 501c3, so they were able to solicit donations. They also can actually contribute a percentage of their income to their own organization, as long as certain rules are met. So it was kind of nice. So they were able to actually get a tax benefit there too. But this was the interesting story. So, we covered it all, that the wife in her particular community wanted to be able to benefit certain children that might not have supplies or books or schools that were hurting or something. And so I said, that's fine. You can do that type of thing with this, right? As long as you make sure it's not like your relatives that are receiving, you have to be very careful, But yeah, that's good. And so we talked about that, and then they went off. And so a year later, it's time to file the Secretary of State annual report. And so I called them, and I was just talking to them, and I said, well, how did you do, your first year with this? And you remember the hurricane in Puerto Rico? It was Maria, right? I think it was Maria. Anyway, so he says, this is a very nice man, he says, well, we haven't done anything this year. And I said, oh. I said, well, we did do one thing. And I said, oh, well, what was that one thing that you did? And he was a pilot, right? So he said, well, my buddy has this plane, and so when that hurricane hit, we felt terrible about all those people in Puerto Rico that didn't have power and harmed, supplies and so forth. So we went and we spent, a substantial amount of this money on this generator, this power generator. And my buddy and I, we flew down to Puerto Rico. And, then we also, with some other money, managed to get some supplies and so forth. And so we pretty much produced power for, like, I don't know, it was 70,000 people or something. You think this is not doing anything?
Wow.
Cool, isn't it? So answer to your, and he was able to legitimately deduct, the cost of the generator. Now you can't be funny about it. He can't jump over to Aruba and be like, I'm gonna deduct this too, But he was able to deduct some of that, and boy, did he feel good, about that. And he was honoring his mother's name, and it was just really kind of cool. So I guess an answer, and he was not a younger person. I mean, I'm not offending him. Who knows what younger is anyway? But he was a retired person, right? And so he felt like this time I'm retired, and I can. I'm sitting here. I'm not going to watch the news, and I'm going to go get on a plane and fly a generator down there, and that'll make me feel good, right? So in response to your question, yes, I see people like that all the time. And do you know that I think a lot of people don't realize they can do this? So I actually have been doing this more and more, and it's not huge sums of money. It's just money they get for some reason or another, or they're retired and they decide I have a little nest egg, I'm gonna put some here, and it makes people feel so good to do that, you know? So anyway, I have to call them soon, and I'll be like, okay, now last year was like no biggie, right? What did you do this year? Anyway, so I hope that answered your question.
Is it? Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the annuity, but I also had a question about in terms of when your clients come to you, have they, it sounds like sometimes they already know that they want to get involved with a charity, and they're already involved with a charity and they want to somehow give a bequest to a charity gift. I'm just wondering if what the charity has done before they get to you. If there is, do you sense from your clients that they've already engaged in deep conversations about the charity, about this option, or are they coming to you and saying like, this is something I'd like to do and I'm doing my estate planning? I'm just wondering kind of the mix of it, because as a charity we can't give legal advice. We can't advise them on the best instruments for them to use, or we shouldn't be. So I'm just wondering how you see some of that playing out.
Yeah, so I have to be honest and say that most of the time, people aren't even thinking about it until we talk about it. And I ask them.
So you're the one who's...
I kind of ask, because I have to ask.
Plan, right.
Yeah, I have to ask them, like, who are your beneficiaries? Well, our children. Okay, that's fine, What about, if something happens to your children? What if something happens here? What if there are, what about that? And, okay, well, then I guess it would be this, whatever. Our church or our synagogue or our animal organization or whatever, our schools, things like that. Okay. And then when you really begin to talk more about it, you'll find, and I'm not prompting anything because I'm just the estate planner, but I think sometimes, I would say probably it's close to like literally 80% of the time, people are not thinking about it. But then again, they're in my office because they're coming to think about it, right? And so then it comes out. And then you do have the 20%, like the client I mentioned with the church, who just, her whole life was at church, And so for her, I asked her, are you going to leave some church? Oh yeah, all, everything, right? Because that's how she was. I have a number of clients like that. So they maybe already know, but it's almost like, I don't think somebody comes in and says, very rarely would I ever have someone come in and say to me, unless maybe brought with somebody else, right, that's thinking about it, hi, we're coming to your office because we want to give to charity. Rarely. It's always more kind of as the whole process, which is why it's important to talk about this, because I think a lot of people don't realize there's so many benefits and ways that they can give, and even, this is relating to schools, but it's very interesting because there are a number of, just to give a hypothetical example, there are a number of Catholic schools that are struggling because they're just struggling now. And so now Illinois has this Empower Now. Now what I found is very interesting is a lot of people anyway, think of it in connection with the Catholic school. Keep the Catholic school open, you donate to Empower Now, Illinois will give you a 75% tax credit. That's pretty amazing. You understand it's tax credit, it's not tax deduction. That means if you give $10,000 to the Empower Illinois, Illinois will give you a $7,500 tax credit, right? And then that money goes to that school. When I looked on the website, it's not just schools though, there's other things that benefit from that, where you get a tax credit. Hardly anybody knows about this. Well, when I started to look at it, I had one school that was going to give this is funny. So imagine somebody's paying $10,000 in Illinois income tax, okay? And they decide they're going to pay their $10,000 to the Illinois Department of Revenue. They're done. They have paid their tax bill. That feels good, right? Okay. Meanwhile, they also could donate $10,000 to Illinois Empower Now, right? Illinois is going to give them a $7,500 tax credit. Now, you still have the $2,500, right? Well, if their kids go to that school, they're going to get a reduction off their tuition. So anyway, in this particular circumstance, this person was still having $10,000 go out the door, right? So either go out the door paying the state of Illinois, or go out the door paying the school and the state of Illinois, but ultimately still going out the door, it's true. But in this situation, 4 needy children were able to attend the school for free that otherwise wouldn't have been able to go. and they were people who it was very important to them to have that parochial education. So I'm saying, like, I don't know, so you're saying like, okay, well, I'm gonna write 1 check here, or I'm gonna write 2 checks here, I don't know, I'm gonna write 2 checks here because it makes me feel good to know that in that particular situation, children are able to go to the school their family wants them to go to, you know what I mean? That otherwise wouldn't be able to go, because, you know, this person wrote a couple checks versus 1, right? But how would we ever know about that? It's really hard to get that Illinois Empower Now account on the website. Let me tell you, it is very complicated. I feel like they make it hard. Once you figure it out, you're like, okay, I'm skirting the system. That's just an example. So it's kind of, I think a lot of people just don't know, you know? And I think that this gentleman with the generator never in a million years thought when he retired that he was going to go fly to Puerto Rico to deliver a generator, you know? So I think it's a combination of kind of developing that awareness and making people aware that, hey, are you charity-minded? Some people aren't, and no problem. If you're not charity-minded, great, let's talk about the next question, right? But if you are charity-minded, there are so many really cool, creative ways that you can give. And you can be as active as you want, or you can be, I just want to write a check and forget about it, great, that's fine too, you know? That's all, you know, various ways, so.
Okay.
Anyone else?
We gotta wind down.
We have to wind down. All right.
Yeah, I look like I had my
Thank you so
hand
much
up.
for having, so I have my information here. If you guys have any questions, just please contact me. I am always available, and I'm always welcoming calls. And I don't, you know, if you ever have a consult, I don't charge for consults. Just come on in and talk to me, okay? Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Awesome. Awesome. Alrighty, if you guys can just hold on, I'm going to end this video and start.